Alrighty, we'll begin. Thanks for all of you that can join us. Sorry for the last minute shake-up here. We're having some issues on Zoom. We are discussing livestock nutrition today, so thanks so much for attending. So again, BC Living Lab is a farmer-centric innovation project that is working to co-develop and aid adoption of beneficial management practices that mitigate climate change while meeting farmers' needs. In terms of a funding acknowledgement, the funding for this Living Labs project is being provided by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada through the Agriculture Climate Solutions Living Lab program. The BC Living Lab project is led by the Investment Agriculture Foundation and is being delivered by the BC Cattlemen and the BC Forage Council. I'll now introduce my counterpart, Karen Raven. Karen.
Great, thanks so much, Wyatt, and thanks everyone for joining us. Yes, it wouldn't be a Zoom event without a little bit of tech issues once in a while. So thanks again for joining. So right after this, we'll go into our attendee poll, and those of you who've been on the session before, will ask questions about whether you're a producer or where you're from, and that just gives us a sense of the audience that we're reaching. So I really appreciate that. And then we have the pleasure of having Dr. Bart Lardner, Professor of Cow-Calf and Forage Management from the University of Saskatchewan, really help talk us through the livestock nutrition considerations with fall-winter grazing. So we're very, very happy to have Dr. Lardner here. We'll just take questions at the end, and it's at the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So we'll go through those, and please feel free to type those in as Dr. Lardner is speaking, and we really look forward to that. I really want the session to be interactive.
I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Lardner.
Okay, thank you. Can you see my screen, Wyatt?
Yeah, you bet.
Good, good. Okay, well, thanks for the invitation to visit with everyone today. It's been a busy 2024 so far with a lot of extension activities, and so really happy to talk to you folks about some of our work out here in Saskatchewan and a little bit about managing extensive grazing systems and how they pertain to the beef industry. All right, so my whole program is about applied beef and forage systems, and it's really all about managing that gestating beef cow through the seasonality, the 12 months of the year, and looking at the different forage types we want to put in front of her. And certainly, forages should be part of that extensive program throughout the year. And we really look at a lot of different areas in the cow-calf sector. We've looked at nutrition, water quality, heifer development, breeding programs, different pasture rejuve programs as well. But today we'll talk about some of the work we've done related to alternative winter grazing systems. The other part of our program is working with an economist, because we always try to put a dollar figure on what we do. And I know that the numbers are only specific to the site and the year that we've done them in, but certainly it's a benchmark. It's something for you as producers to look at and say, you know what, if I did that, what would my cost per cow be, cow per day be, and could I actually implement that system and make it work for me wherever I live in Western Canada. So yeah, I've been around for a couple of years. Started out many years ago at Lanigan, Saskatchewan, a facility called Western Beef Development Center, and did a lot of our work out there, as you can see. Of course, things change, and so we have relocated now a little closer to Saskatoon, to the university campus. Lanigan's about an hour and a half east, and so now we're located at Clavet, Saskatchewan, just 20 minutes off campus, so we're able to get out to the site quicker, sooner, and have our students out there, manage our labs for undergrad students, and so kind of really convenient to have a nice section of land out there where really I had never seen a grazing ruminant before, and so our ability to look at nutrient cycling, look at the impact of the grazing ruminant on soil, plant, water, and air, and work with a whole team of researchers when we do a research study. So exciting times, certainly. All right, and I've been asked to talk about some of the systems that we've looked at in terms of research. I'll talk about bale graze, swath graze, crop residue, and then focus a little bit on corn grazing research we've done too. And then I've been asked to also talk about polycrops or cover crops. And so certainly you're going to get our experiences and our pros and cons with each of these systems. And so just food for thought for those people that are listening today. As I've already mentioned, in my mind, forages are the foundation of the cow-calf beef industry. I think you should try and put an annual or perennial forage in front of these animals 12 months of the year. In some respect, there's a multitude of different species. There's benefits of a lot of forage types. And along with native rangeland, there's tame seeded species. And so, just don't put all your eggs in one basket and have, a section of crested wheatgrass. Maybe look at the different varieties that are adapted to your region or wherever you live. And certainly we're getting more and more of these being released by our forage breeders in Western Canada. And so in my mind, it's about their persistence, their adaptation, and then do they actually perform for you on your farm or your ranch? I want to just briefly talk a little bit about managing that mama cow or that weaned calf or that replacement heifer or that stocker or maybe that breeding bull. And I think we need to really consider body condition when we have her coming into that fall winter grazing period. We've had a fairly open fall up till Christmas here. Then winter set in. We had some warm Jan days. Now we're getting into the sub-zero -40 here with another, they call it Alberta Clipper, just hit our province. And so you know what, that cow has, she's out there, she's on the extensive systems. And so condition is first and foremost. And really in all of our grazing research, my objective is to have her coming in at a moderate body condition on our scale of 1 to 5 that we use here in Canada, at about a 3, maybe a 3.5 coming into the fall. And my objective is to maintain body condition, okay? I don't want her to go backwards. I don't want thin cows coming into the calving season because thin cows don't rebreed. And so can I manage her on that extensive grazing system and maintain body condition? The Americans use a different scale of 1 to 9, but certainly there's a high correlation between body condition, fat reserves, and reproductive performance. All right, so briefly just looking at what does a thin cow look like? I know that that's not one that you have in your herd, but certainly not in good condition coming into a fall program. Obviously, you have to change her diet, her nutrition to bring her up to that one, probably a moderate condition score of 3. And we don't want to get her too overweight or too over conditioned because we're going to have troubles, especially when it comes to calving time, dystocia, or difficult birthing problems. And so really, we're trying to shoot for that on a scale of 1 to 5, about that 3 body condition score. All right, and so briefly, we could talk about nutrition for the whole hour, but I'm just going to just throw these numbers up there. These are right out of NASEM 2016, the latest publication of beef cattle nutrient requirements. And so briefly, just 4 different phases: mid gestation, late gestation, and lactation. If you're a spring calving herd, then you're probably coming out of that mid to late gestation, right? This is February. So you're probably, if you're an April calving herd, you're probably getting into that late gestation, that 3rd trimester of pregnancy. And so you can look at the values for crude protein in the diet and energy or TDN in the diet. And you can see the range in mid gestation of crude protein, 7 to 8, late gestation, 9 to 10, and lactation, 11 to 12. For energy requirements, she needs about 50 to 55 TDN. For mid, late is about 58 to 60, and then lactation about 63 to 65. So just, you're really trying to target her requirements. Obviously, you want a feed test. You want to look at all your feed types in the fall and say, you know what, I know the energy density or the nutrient density of each of these, and make sure that she has a balanced program, balanced diet for energy, protein, water, vitamins, and minerals. We also look at intake, and I've been asked lots of times about how much do I have to allocate in an extensive grazing system? And I really go on that percent body weight. You can see that there. And, I think for an average weight cow, 1,400 pounds, I'm going to allocate 30, 40 pounds of something dry matter, realizing that weather, environment, residual is going to play an important factor. Obviously, you want to put a good mineral program in front of these cows, a good cal-phos ratio, 2 to 1 or greater. And I really, really focus on those fertility, trace minerals, copper, zinc, and manganese. So important to get those cows back into calf again. we've done a lot of polls and over the years, and certainly this is just one Western Canadian cow-calf survey, just looking at, what are the different types of winter feeding systems that producers adopt. And, really, you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. And so we see a lot of folks actually have integrated 2 to 3 different systems, right? And so trying to use, 2 or 3 systems of grazing or feeding over the winter months, just to reduce your feed cost per cow per day and get her, through that winter time period and coming into that calving period. So you can see all these, there's about 6 or 7 or 8 there on the bottom. And so, every operation will integrate different ones. Every farm's a different case study. And certainly producers work with these different systems, and those are the ones that really work are the ones they're going to use for year after year. All right, what do we need to think about? Obviously, wind protection is first and foremost. For some of you in BC, certainly it may not be a big issue, but out here in Saskatchewan, lack of trees, lack of natural shelter belts, a wind chill factor, her energy requirements are going to ramp up big time. And so certainly want to make sure there's good wind protection. We do have these portable windbreaks nowadays. Fencing is a tool. I see a lot of folks have adopted it. Some producers have an aversion to fencing, and that's fair. But we use it just to control utilization and also control residual leftover material. Winter watering systems, all the funding available now with off-calf and Living Lab and whatnot, certainly, you don't want direct access. And so there's really good options out there to install a winter watering system on your farm or your ranch. Okay, what are some of the benefits? And this is a kind of a benchmark study that myself and Dr. Jeff Shano did a long time ago. And we're just looking at the benefits of deposition of manure nutrients using an extensive winter grazing program. And so that's really what you want to see after you've had the cattle out there. Whatever system you've used is just a nice, even layer of manure nutrients. And so that's not what you want to see. And that happened to us several years ago. As you can see, we were trying to background some 5-weight calves on fall rye swaths. We had 2 freezing rains and a blizzard. And so it was kind of asking those calves to get out there and eat frozen celery. So, you always have to have plan B in your back pocket. In this case, we had to bring the calves back to the yard, feed them in the pen and a round bell feeder, but we did come out there in the spring and we're able to utilize that crop in the spring months. So yeah, Mother Nature will not always work with you. Sometimes she's going to work against you. And so you always have to have that plan B in the back of your pocket. Okay, what bale grazing, and this system showed up, probably 15, 20 years ago. And I just saw some producers integrating it. And so really what we're trying to do here is just trying to validate some of the findings that they're seeing in terms of rejuvenation, pasture rejuvenation. And so what is it? You're setting the feed out in a grid pattern in that nutrient deficient acre on your farm or your ranch, right? So you want to find some nutrient deficient area, land, pasture, whatever, where deposition of manure nutrients are going to benefit. And you're setting those bales out on a grid pattern, probably 15 feet apart. In this case, we're using that portable electric fence to allocate 3 to 4 days of grazing. And our whole objective is to leave those nutrients on that bale graze site and obviously reduce our costs, our paid unpaid labor, our yardage costs, all of those just to reduce that feed cost per cow per day. Now you can use different land bases. You can put it out for 10 days of grazing or 30 days of grazing or 2 months of grazing. I've seen producers really perfect this system in our province and over to the east in Manitoba, do a fantastic job of moving their herd around different pods throughout the different months and just taking advantage of those manure nutrients. In this particular study, we had a long established in a very poor yielding Russian wild ryegrass pasture. Okay, so that's a perennial grass pasture. It probably needed to be broke up and reseeded. So great site for us to implement this research. And so we put on a few treatments, basically applied straight raw manure. You can see there 30 ton per acre. We also had some compost that we're able to get our hands on, put that out there on that pasture. And then we had a check area where no nutrients were applied either by the animals or by equipment. We also had 2 winter grazing systems. So we put nutrients out there with equipment, 30 tons per acre with a tractor manure spreader, 10 tons per acre of compost in the control area. And then we had 2 other winter grazing systems, either a bale graze system with cattle or a bale process system with cattle. You see here, this is the soil ammonium nitrate nitrogen levels. And on the red bars on the left, that's the soil ammonium nitrate nitrogen levels in the fall from soil sampling. And the other ones, the green or the brown, are the spring soil ammonium nitrate nitrogen levels. So you can see really a 3 to 4 increase where the cows are out there winter grazing. And a lot of that N is obviously from urine deposition. So we're capturing that. We're taking advantage of that. We're not seeing that when we apply the actual raw manure or the compost material, because nitrogen is a very mobile nutrient. And so a lot of it is actually left that straw pack in that dry lot pen when we go to spread that manure several months later. All right, how did that tired old pasture respond? Unbelievable. Here you can see a nearly 3-fold increase where those cattle are out there grazing and leaving behind new manure nutrients. And obviously response with the equipment applied manure, but certainly not to the level that where we saw where the cattle are out there grazing. Really, if you look at at a round bale, you can think about it as a fertilizer bag. And so really the level of NPK and S there, you can see in a 1,400-pound bale, the bale is consumed by the animals, passes through in the fecal material and the urine, and taken up by the pasture grass. And so we're trying to look at a gross analytical approach and measure the nutrient cycling. It's not a very efficient system, that ruminant digestive system. Only about 10% of the N is retained, and only about 80 or 20% of the phosphorus is retained, okay? And so the rest is coming out the back door, and it's up to us to take advantage of that wherever we're managing those cattle on that nutrient deficient acre of land on our farm or our ranch. So we did a gross analytical approach, and we're trying to summarize the level of N and P, started in the bale, went through the critters, and wound up in the pasture grass the following spring. We could account for 34% of the N that started out in the bale showed up in the pasture forage, and 22% of the phosphorus started in the bale showed up in the pasture grass. Certainly not a closed system, right? But certainly one where we're taking advantage of that N and P by winter grazing. We compared that to the dry lot where that N and P was deposited in that straw pack, and we can only account for 7 and 4% of the N and P. So certainly a lot of that nutrients are mobile, have left that manure or that straw pack when we go to spread it weeks or months later after the cattle have left. So, you look at what's coming out the back door in the terms of daily manure and urine output for a 1,400-pound cow, about 55 pounds of fecal material, about 20 pounds of urine, and that's the concentration of N and P in both those. And because we chose to graze 64 cows for 110 days on this particular study site, even if we lost them through volatilization or runoff, we were leaving behind about 100 pounds of N per acre. We know the cost of buying nitrogen in the spring of 2024. So let's take advantage of some of the nitrogen coming from manure nutrients. So that's really what you're leaving behind, folks. It's litter, it's residue, right? And that's a buffer against drought situations, low rainfall, 1/10 rain, and that litter is there to capture those small, limited rain events. It's to keep those nutrients there for subsequent spring growth of the pasture the following year. And it really is an insurance policy for producers against dry conditions or possibly losing a lot of those nutrients or water events through runoff. So really, the work we've done several bale graze studies prior, but really just to summarize, we're capturing those urine and fecal nutrients, and really not a negative effect on the cow performance or on reproductive efficiency, and actually a lower cost per cow per day in that bale graze system compared to managing them in a dry lot system. It's kind of prudent about how do I manage these systems? It just makes sense that maybe you want to rotate where you have these systems set up. Maybe don't do it on the same site year after year. You're trying to take advantage of manure nutrients, and so maybe defer an area, maybe come back every 3 years. And certainly in our particular study, we had stock densities of 800 cow days per acre, we feel that we pushed the envelope big time on that study. Probably you're more prudent to be that 300-400 cow days per acre compared to what we had at 800 level. Another system we see a lot of producers use is swath grazing. We're involved with some of the cover crop work we're doing right now, just putting seeding a monoculture annual cereal out there, an oat, a barley or something, and then managing it at the correct stage, putting it down, harvesting it in a windrow, and then coming out with the critters and grazing for those winter, fall months, right? Just to, again, capture those manure nutrients and probably reduce your feed cost per cow per day. Certainly, a lot of previous work has shown the benefits of this, less labor is involved, but certainly, as we said previously, monitor cow condition. You need to manage and monitor provision of water, provision of shelter, just goes without saying. We know we can swath graze mature beef cows in good body condition. Another program we looked at was trying to background our weaned calves. Can we actually do that with the swath graze program? And so this is some of the work we did previously with Dr. John McKinnon and our grad student. We had over a 3-year period, we had 3 systems. We are either swath grazing an annual cool season, barley in this instance, or an annual warm season, millet in this instance, compared to a traditional pen feeding dry lot system. I try to do multi-year studies. Why? Because environment is our biggest enemy, right? We want to look at a 3-year window because environment varies over each year. Every winter is very different. And so we come away knowing that there's variation and hopefully make some sound implications after we've done that multi-year study. In this case, we were swath grazing these weaned calves over a 3-year period, allocating that feed every 3 days with portable electric fence. But in this case, we had to provide a supplement. Okay, when we're actually backgrounding calves, we have a targeted gain about 1.5, maybe 2 pounds per head per day. Obviously, they need extra energy and protein versus the basal forage, what it's providing. So obviously, you want to provide that supplement. We did so at 5 pounds per head per day. After each backgrounding phase, we brought the calves in and we put them into a feedlot system, finishing them out at, as you can see, 12 millimeter back fat, moving from that high roughage to a high concentrate feed. And so really, the major objective here was to look at, was there an effect of the backgrounding system, either background swath grazed barley, background swath grazed millet, or traditional feeding a processed hay in a dry lot pen on the feedlot finishing performance. Okay, here's the average daily gain of our calves in the backgrounding phase. And you can see on the right-hand side that our barley swath grazed calves gain similar to our dry lot calves. Okay, what those barley calves were doing is actually selecting the plant parts and actually consuming the barley heads off the swath material and getting that supplement intake. The millet swath grazed calves could not do this. They had to eat the whole plant, and there was higher moisture content in the millet swath grazed windrows. Okay. So actually, we know that the preference, the palatability, the grazing behavior, calves are more selective. And in this case, hence, they grew pretty well on that barley swath grazed system. Now going into the feedlot finishing performance of these 3 systems, there's our barley calves starting. On the left is our start weights, and on the right is our finish weight and our average daily gain. We can see the millet calves came in a little bit lighter, but we saw compensatory gain kick in and everybody finished at similar weights. All right, what about cost? Obviously, we came away after 3 years knowing that our barley swath grazed calves, our cost to gain in this instance was 41 and 43% less than those millet swath grazed calves or those dry lot calves. So it really is all about trying to get that pounds on that background calf and reduce your cost of gain on a daily basis. Let's just talk briefly about grazing corn. Interestingly, this system came around about 15 years ago. There was a variety of corn came through Western Canada called Amazing Graze. That was a variety out of Baldridge Farms, Ohio. Okay, about a 3,000 heat unit variety corn. Where I was at Lanigan, Saskatchewan, I'm getting about 1,900 heat units. Okay, so we put some of that Amazing Graze into the field. It got about knee high and then it quit growing. Well, obviously it wasn't an adapted variety. So you really look at what are the grazing days needed, what are the corn heat units needed, and get that variety that's going to work for you wherever you live. Where does it fit into a system? Well, you know what? It actually exceeds what that beef cow needs. And in fact, I've seen cows put on body condition grazing corn. Okay. The one thing about a corn system and grazing cows coming close to calving, it may not meet their protein requirements. So think about a protein sup in that instance. Again, for growing wean cows, we probably have to supplement. And certainly you want to choose the variety. We always kind of look at, you know what, we get our first killing frost about September 15th. And so I want to have roughly about 50% fiber, 50% starch in my corn graze field when I start to graze. Why? Because we need that fiber to buffer that rumen acidosis or that drop in pH. We'll get to that here in a minute. We want to limit graze this crop too, because you know what, as I talked about preference, palatability, cows are very selective. They're going to go after the ice cream part of the plant. They will go after the cobs first when you get them a fresh allocation of grazing. And so you want to make sure they're going to get some cob, but they're going to get some fibers, some stalk, some leaf, some stover, okay? And it's that fiber is going to mitigate that drop in rumen pH. Again, we're only allocating 3 to 4 days of grazing and trying to make sure they consumed enough fiber to buffer that consumption of cob. And obviously we know that the cobs are full of starch, and starch is just going to lower that rumen pH. You're going to see some naive cows. Some of the cows we worked with in the past had never seen corn grazing. We're turning them out into a standing cornfield, giving them several rows. Those cows actually went and grazed every bit of dead grass around every fence post for about day 1, day 2. And then finally somebody went over and bit that first stalk, and then we're off to the races, okay? So it takes a bit of a learning behavior, adaptation period, if you like, and certainly bring in a good trace mineral program. There's a lot of phosphorus in that corn, so we want to maintain that 2-to-1 cal-phos ratio with a good trace mineral program. Just briefly, some of the early work we did, we evaluated 5 varieties, you can see, and they range from 2050 to 2250 corn heat units, seeding it in in June, and then grazing it November to Feb. And really, this is the attraction of corn. It really does grow 3 to 4 times the biomass per acre compared to those annual cereals I talked about previously, and pretty good nutritive value in terms of protein and energy. This was just some of the numbers in terms of grazing cost per cow per day, the range of 70 cents to $1.40. That is quite dated. Okay, we did this work about a decade ago. And so certainly it's all about reducing your feed cost per cow per day, but obviously growing more biomass per acre. That's the attraction of whole plant corn grazing. You know, I've seen many producers get turned off or have a bad year, or maybe have a train wreck in terms of mortality. And in a lot of those instances, they're not aware that cows are going to go out there and consume cobs. They're going to wind up with rumen acidosis. And so really a lot of it is adaptation. Maybe, you know, give them 7 to 10 days before exposure to the cornfield. Maybe add an extra fiber out there when they are grazing that whole plant corn, and maybe limit that daily grazing time. Some of the work we did with cannulated cows, we're just looking at where did that rumen pH move when cows are out there grazing either whole plant corn, whole plant barley, or maybe a traditional dry lot system where they're eating green feed bales, okay? And we had set up a 3x3 lat square. We had indwelling rumen pH meters, and this is just the pH. And so when it dropped below a level of 5.8, that would be indicative of SARA or subacute rumen acidosis, okay? And so in year 1, we actually saw that we had a lot of predation on our corn. We had a lot of starlings, a lot of bird predation. And so really they consumed a lot of the starch. And so in that instance, it was the barley grazing program, the barley swath grazing program, where we saw lower levels of pH. But in year 2, it was the corn graze program. So again, we're coming away saying, you know what, if you're concerned about rumen acidosis, maybe put that fiber source out there just to mitigate that drop in rumen pH. All right, let's just wrap up and talk a little bit about cover cropping. You know, there's a lot of conversations in the last 8-10 years about polycrop or cover crop grazing. We're hearing a lot of claims about it. And so I think as researchers, we need to go in there and do multi-year studies and maybe validate some of those claims and give you folks the right information. Now, we've looked at a variety of annual forages too. And in my mind, annual forages really do supplement a perennial forage system, okay? And so, of course, we're going to look at monoculture, oat, barley, rye, treated kale. They all have pros and cons. In my mind, make sure you pick a forage variety of each of these cereal types, okay? There are forage varieties of oat, barley, rye, and treated kale. So make sure you're going out there, getting that smooth on variety, or maybe that broadleaf forage type. They even have a forage wheat variety that's being released this year. We're trying to do some small plot research on that. In terms of the warm season crops, certainly sorghum is a sorghum or Sudan grass, or maybe the hybrid sorghum Sudan grass are options. Corn, we just talked about corn. Some of the millets are out there, the red proso, the foxtail, the golden German millet. Lots of varieties there. And I always get asked, Bart, what's really the best annual pasture type? And I kind of always migrate to fall rye. And we're seeing that showing up in a lot of these cover crop mixtures as well. It's a very competitive variety. It actually acts as a biennial. You'll put it in 6 weeks later, get some grazing. It might even overwinter and you'll get some spring grazing, hence it acts like a biennial. In my mind, the work we've done, fall rye kind of acts a little bit better, performs a little bit better compared to winter wheat or winter triticale, but that's just our experience out here in Saskatchewan. All right, a lot of claims, as I said, about cover crops, okay? A lot of benefits, certainly why are they there? Improving soil health. I'll have a few comments about that here in a minute. You know, obviously we're trying to enhance different capacities above and below ground, you know, increasing soil aggregation, allowing porosity, allowing capture of those minimal water events, okay? Reducing erosion, but at the same time trying to provide quality feed for our grazing cattle. So, you know, you really have to think about what is the objective of putting that cover crop in rotation, and how is it gonna benefit our overall long-term plan. This, I think, folks, is really where they come in. So I talked about a lot of our systems previously are basically monoculture, either grazing straight barley or grazing straight oat, or maybe straight corn, okay? A lot of those rooting systems, maybe fibrous rooting system. In this case, you see with these cover crops, in that mix, you're going to get a blend of fibrous and or tap rooted systems, okay? And so when I come away, I look at some of the benefits for that. Below ground exercise, I think that's where this really sits. We're seeing a lot of issues in terms of salinity, and certainly, you know, maybe cover crops are going to be one of those options going forward. We're talking about cover crops, and I really break it down to 4 functional groups. We have annual legumes, okay? We have cool season, we have warm season, and now we have the brassicas. A little bit about the annual legumes. We see a lot of conversations about hairy vetch. I really caution that maybe you want to limit the amount in your blend, the composition of that. There are some anti-quality factors associated with that. We have had some incidences out here in terms of producer bad experiences. I have looked at the crimson, and the Brazilian clover is an annual legume. Where I'm at in East Central Saskatchewan, it just didn't perform like maybe it would in a wetter climate, maybe some areas of British Columbia. Just saying. The cool seasons, Italian ryegrass, the warm seasons, certainly the millets and the sorghums can perform. The brassicas now, again, a caution, maybe just limit them in the mixture because of some of the anti-quality factors that I'll speak to here in a minute. Along with that mixture, the suggestion is to bring in a pulse, obviously a pea, and maybe a cereal crop like an oat or barley as well when you're putting in that cover crop. This is just some of our experience, okay? Here we're talking about a study we did, nearly 7 years ago. We're comparing monoculture barley in a swath graze system compared to a cover crop blend. There's our Maverick barley, and there's a cover crop blend. That's the seeding rates that we put it in June of each year. And then we swathed it in August and then grazed it in that October to December, early January time period. Coming away, this is the forage biomass. Obviously, the barley had greater biomass compared to the polycrop. Why? Well, we had a lot of issues in terms of weed pressure. And in this particular instance, I did not put that annual cereal in with the cover crop. I thought to myself, you know what? I'm growing a barley swath graze system monoculture by itself. Why am I putting the barley in with the pulse along with the cover crop mixture? But we learned something coming away with this particular study. That's what we learned. That's red root pigweed, okay? And so weed pressure really did choke out a lot of those varieties in the polycrop mixture or the cover crop mixture. What are some of the challenges? These are some of the cautionary things. These cover crops or polycrops, they have elevated levels of sulfur, okay? Along with molybdenum in the forage material, that will form a thiomolybdate complex and tie up that copper, zinc, and manganese in that mineral program. So we really want to be aware that we don't want to have too high a level of sulfur total diet. The other issue was the elevated level of nitrates, okay? We talk about nitrate toxicity. So certainly we want to be aware that we don't want to get over a certain level of nitrates in that total diet as well. So sulfur, nitrates, a couple things to think about, and certainly you can see high levels of calcium that might really impact that cal-phos ratio. Again, the winters that we grazed it, we saw a variance in terms of a freeze thaw. What happened is that it actually prevented access to the forage in the windrow. On the left, you can see our polycrop windrows. Certainly a lot of biomass or residue was left behind after grazing, a lot less in the barley system. But here's probably some of the good news coming away from our particular study. Now we're talking about the effects of either grazing a monoculture barley or a polycrop or cover crop mixture on soil organic carbon levels. In terms of total organic carbon, you can see the varying levels between the two treatments, but here's the real deal. We saw a greater level of root biomass in our cover crop program compared to our monoculture barley. And so we also saw a change in total soil organic mass over a 2-year period, which could be accounted for by that greater rooting biomass from the cover crop or polycrop, where there were actually increased total organic carbon in those soil organic carbon areas that were deficient. We're continuing with the cover crop research here at University of Saskatchewan. Our student Shelby's looking at a 2-3-year study comparing a monoculture to a simple 4-species to a complex 8-species mixture. We're comparing yield, quality, top performance, economics, soil characterization, and interestingly, we're looking at enteric emissions. Those are the levels of methane and CO2 coming out of the front door of that grazing ruminant. We're partnering with our Ag Canada friends. We have eddy covariance flux towers out there. We're trying to look at gas fluctuation out there with collared cows and using that system to validate against our green feeder system where we're measuring CH4 and CO2 emissions coming from the grazing cows. That's just our blends. You see our monoculture oat, our simple 4-species, and our complex 8-species. In terms of how do they perform, here's our yield and biomass. In years of limiting rainfall, where our research site is, we're about at 12 inches of rainfall per year. In the last 2 years, we've got about 3 or 4 inches on our site, and that certainly has impacted biomass, but I'm coming away getting about 2 tons per acre of something to graze. Pretty good protein levels, pretty low fiber levels, pretty good. How did the critters do? You can see they did pretty well. All of these body weight changes have been corrected for conceptus weight of the pregnant grazing cow, okay? So that's one thing that we do. Okay, just to summarize our conversation here this afternoon, what are some of the implications with managing these cover crops? Certainly think about weed pressure, right? You probably want to establish on a clean site. Not only that, what is your objectives? To produce something for grazing for your animals, to maybe improve soil health characterization, maybe an alternative, but some of the concerns we have in terms of anti-quality or high sulfur level, maybe potassium, maybe high nitrates, and consider the species in the mix, okay? If I'm paying for 17 species, I want to see 17 established. I don't want to see only 6 coming out and germinating when I'm already paying for those other ones, but they didn't show up. Weather can be very unpredictable. Certainly you want to be aware of levels of anti-quality factors, so probably a feed test is prudent. And then again, have plan B, right? Doesn't matter what system we talked about this afternoon, always have that plan B ready to go. That's just an average of all the systems we've looked at in our program over the years. in percent lower cost compared to dry lot feeding. Now you can see swath graze, bale graze, straw chaff, standing corn, or maybe stockpile forages. It's just an indication of some of the work and maybe some of the predictions and where you might be in serving or maybe reducing feed cost per cow per day. All right, so obviously we want to adopt these systems we talked about. We want to capture those manure nutrients. In my mind, it's a really good chance for you folks to adopt some of these best management practices on your farm or your ranch with this Living Lab program. It just gets more producers doing, good things on their operations to try and diversify, right? Try and make sure you're getting through that calendar year. Certainly, the prices for beef cattle are pretty high right now. So we also want to make sure we can feed them properly, adequately throughout the year. Be a little patient with these naive cows, okay? It may take 1 or 2 years for them to adapt. It's a system where not only the cows have to get used to it, you, the owner, has to get used to it, right? So obviously be aware of wind protection, where's the water point, and then obviously always have that plan B. With that, I'll just wrap it up. And there's my lab group, and any additional information, certainly I'm not hard to find. We have lots of videos on our website. In that case, you can shut Bart off after two or 3 minutes. You couldn't do that this afternoon. Thanks for your time.
Super. Thank you so much, Dr. Lardner. That was really informative, and really appreciate all the pros and the cons, because certainly have to have that consideration, and really appreciate that. I believe we have Paul Devick from Devick's Ranches on the line. Wyatt has made it so that you can speak if you're there, Paul, and he's one of the 2 mother sites for the BC Living Labs, and they tested, for those of you who haven't heard him speak before, they also did the standing corn grazing and cover crops as well. And Paul, if you're on, please feel free to share your comments, and then Wyatt is opening up the chat. So for those of you, if you want to type in your questions, I'm sure there'll be a few, and we'll just go from there. So Paul, if you're on the call, please just give some of your thoughts, because you had some interesting results with yours and how your cows adapted as well. Okay, so we'll open it up to the questions. You may not have been able to get on with some of our technical difficulties. So, and if there's any questions, just please feel free to put those in the chat. We'll just leave it open for another couple of minutes to see what.
Hopefully people are able to use the chat. I think I've disabled it. I had a question for Bart, I guess, to kick things off. So when is the, I guess, best time to plan for Plan B?
That's a moving target. Yeah, like, we put that one year we put those calves out there on that swath graze fall rye, and we had them out there for maybe a month, 30 days, and then we had that extreme blizzard and freezing rain event, and they just couldn't consume it. It was and so obviously you want to be out there managing, monitoring, and we've seen that their intake was challenged, and so we had to pull them off because so that was a month into it. Sometimes you'll go along, you'll get a good 60 days, and then you'll get a 3-4 foot dump of snow, which we always like to see. And I've had that happen too, not in the last 8 or so years, but certainly prior to that. So it'll vary. You could be early into that grazing program, you could be well into it, and you kind of have to say, okay, you know what, I got to shut her down because intake is being jeopardized. And so bringing them back, but always trying to look at getting back out there in the spring and maybe getting out there. If snow depth is not too big of an issue, getting out there. And in some cases, a lot of these systems may not work if you get that darn winter rain. And I've heard that. In fact, we did some work around Prince George there. Previously, we had some extension days over there, and certainly there are some years where you do get rain, and that just doesn't work in terms of bale graze program. A lot of some of these systems too is predation, so you'll be feeding the local deer population, which can be very frustrating. And so you'll see producers and going out and investing in fencing or maybe only putting out enough feed for their herd and then having the rest of the feed yard that's well fenced, because you don't want to be feeding the local elk or the local deer population. So yeah, all kinds of things will force you to think outside the box.
Great, thank you. And we have a few questions in the chat. The first one, how do you prevent the cows from consuming plastic when you're doing the bale grazing, like twine or the netting?
Well, that's a good question. And, first of all, the work we did, we used twine. We had bales with plastic twine. The one thing I strongly suggest is you make sure you remove the twine from all the bales in the warm September-ish, October-ish month, not in January when you ask your wife to go out there and remove the twine. You might get into trouble there. We've had producers set the bales different ways, either on their end or maybe on their side. Just trying to look at maximizing utilization. Some of the guys have used the netting wrap of the bales. And actually, I've had producers say that works the best. It kind of works like a round bale feeder, and they just see better utilization of the bale with that netting compared to, say, the twine situation. How you get them to quit, to not consume the plastic? Probably remove it. So, and it's up to everybody. Some folks will maybe remove the twine, some folks maybe not. So, what the work we did, we just tried to look at the benefits of it in terms of cost per day, soil impact on soil characterization, animal performance, the basics. What I see is a lot of producers have taken this system and really perfected it, made it their own. And so, I have some folks in Manitoba that he's been bale grazing for decades now, and he will put a blend of maybe 3 hay bale and 1 straw, or maybe 3 green feed and 1 straw, just trying to reduce, the type of feed that's out there, or vary it. Just trying to reduce the cost per cow per day.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate that. There's next question is from Stephanie. Can you talk a little bit more about what climates swath grazing may be successful in, wet versus dry climates, for example?
Well, no, that's a great question, because we are very fortunate out here in Saskatchewan. Typically, we get a cold, dry climate, and so hopefully, when you knock that swath graze program down in those windrows, you get an adequate snow blanket to protect it or protect any leaching effects, right, from that freeze thaw I talked about with our previous study. And then we put the animals out there. They only have to push through a few inches or maybe a foot of snow to find that swath. And those seasoned grazers will know to go out there and find that swath. Believe you me, they have it figured out. Now that's in a cold, dry. When we get those wetter systems, that can be a challenge in terms of freeze thaw. It can be a challenge in terms of molding issues. Okay, so you know what? I have seen, or some of the benefits of maybe putting a warm season millet out there compared to a barley or an oat, is that millet has that waxy cuticle, and that they're suggesting that it will not see that nutrient leaching like we would with that other cool season annual. Maybe thinking about a red proso or a golden German millet compared to an oat or a barley.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much. The next question is from Jody. What are your thoughts on growing and feeding winter barley? I understand it's more prevalent in Eastern Canada, but wondering about the possibility of out west with growing and feeding winter barley.
Yeah. I'm not sure what she's referring to when she speaks about winter barley. Is that a winter cereal seeded in the spring so it didn't vernalize and produce reproductive structures or seed heads?
I'll just see if she'll answer in the chat. Yes. That's
Well, like I say, you know, I'm all for a winter cereal, seeding it in the spring, and so really all you get, or late spring or maybe early summer, all you get is that vegetative growth, which is what you want for quality feed. And so, you know, that's kind of that fall rye, winter wheat, winter triticale, winter barley conversation I made earlier. Is you don't have to worry about it going reproductive and putting in a lot of fiber into the plant. Any growth you see is going to be vegetative and hopefully of higher quality. So I'm really all for a winter cereal, you know, late spring seeded and grazed that year.
Great, thank you. And let's see, here we have another one here. This is from Julia. Have you thought of tree forage, which would also give shade and shelter, from an Englander with lots of trees on the landscape? So that's with respect to trees.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that she's referring to, you know, trees as a natural shelter belt. I'm pretty sure of it. So absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're guilty as charged out here. And the crop guys have cleared every stitch of bush from every acre of land, and they actually farm right up to the power poles if they can. And so now we have to bring in those portable windbreaks I talked about earlier. But you bet, if there's natural shelter belts, go for it. You know, one of the interesting things I've seen with these systems we talked about this afternoon and the adoption of them across Canada, I'm down in the northern US talking about them. I've got a bunch of meetings lined up there coming up as well. And I know, and I've been lucky enough to go across over to the UK and to Wales and speaking to those producers. And so they're actually adopting a lot of these systems, and they may be, you know, looking at different types of crops, but they call it outwintering over there. And just getting those cows out of the barn for a few days or maybe a week or so is beneficial, right? For exercise, all those things. And so it's really interesting how we've kind of gone away from just managing the cow in that barn to maybe just trying to adopt some extensive system.
Great, thanks very much. The next question is relating to fall rye, a question from Holly. We have a spotty fall rye field seeded late summer 2023. We want to silage the fall rye and graze it in the fall. What would you do with it? It's under irrigation, light soils in central BC.
Okay, so you seeded it in late summer 23. It overwintered. Obviously, you're looking for some growth in the spring of this year. I would manage and monitor. I'd look at the growth coming out of the winter here. You know, after it's fertilized, it could go to seed head. So it could throw up a reproductive head late spring or maybe early summer. So, you know, if I have the ability to silage, yep, for sure. I'd be maybe testing for nitrates. So just a cautionary thing. Or even if you can graze it, if you have, I don't know if you're spring grazing or a spring calving herd or whatever but yeah, you could go either way. But I would probably graze it sooner than late fall or the fall time period. But if you're able to silage it, yeah, it's all about what does it look like? What's it going to look like? Is it going to throw up seed heads? And just, you know, make your decision based off that.
Great, thanks very much. And that's it for the questions in the chat. And we're just 2 minutes away here from the end. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank you, Dr. Lardner, for making time in your day and bringing it all together and really sharing everything with our producers as they consider these practices. We're going to be posting all the presentations on bclivinglab.ca. And for those are being posted right now, for those of you that have been on the sessions. And all of our research presenters have agreed to make the presentations available in PDF format. So we will also have those available for you as well. So I'll turn it over to Wyatt for the final final comments, and thank you to everyone who's joined us throughout this session, both ranchers, researchers, and everyone who's from all different parts of the West. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I don't have too much to add other than I'll be posting probably this Zoom first, just so that people do get to see the whole session here today, and then we'll probably have a nicer edited version at some point, as Karen just mentioned. So again, sorry for the mix up there, and really appreciate everyone that was able to come out on these calls. I thought there was a lot of good information, and it was really nice to have Bart on the call today to kind of really round out and kind of summarize the discussions we've been having this last couple of weeks. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Bart, and thank you, Karen, for organizing.
You
With
are.
that, we'll say bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.